an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Wizards at War, chapters 2 and a half of 3. In this chapter and a half, we get more information about exactly what is going on, and it seems really, really dire. And you know when the senior wizards are feeling so nervous that they almost don't want to tell you what's going on, it's got to be very bad. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Patricia for commissioning this episode. I just wanted to mention that Yama isn't able to make it to this recording, but she left some notes in the comment section on the Crowdcast ahead of time. She says, about the screen door. I think she meant the door going out of the house and got mixed up somehow when writing that section. It's still weird, I agree, but didn't seem to be on purpose. Yama, the only reason that I question whether or not that could be what it is that I'm reading the New Millennium version, which is the revised, later released copy. And I would think that if that were the case, that would have been caught. However, stranger things have happened, so maybe you're right. I maintain that she just has a weird screen door in her house. Just a weird thing. Multiple screen doors, by the way, but it sounds like from the way it's described, it's the same one. I'm not going back over this again, but you guys all know it's a weird thing. And then Yama says, oh my God, isn't this counselor the best ever? This is so great. Wish more adults were like that. Yeah. That for me is a real highlight of this section. It's interesting because Nita doesn't feel like she can tell him very much. And I sort of wondered why that was, because the fact that he knows about wizards, in my opinion, means that there's no harm. It's not like he can do anything to interrupt or make it more likely that they'll fail at their plans. He isn't capable of any sort of interference. And I don't think that, who's he going to tell that it's going to be a problem? Any other wizards in the world are probably going to know about this problem very, very shortly. So I found her reticence to tell him sort of puzzling. She was sort of treating it like it was HIPAA and, he should only have information if she gets permission. And I just I guess I don't have a good idea how privileged any of this info is, assuming that somebody knows about wizards already. We had Tom showing up at her house talking to her dad about all of this before she and Kit knew about it. So it doesn't seem like that should even be part of the problem, But it doesn't, I'm going to get to that in a moment. So let me go back to the book. This section begins right where the last one left off, with them being told that they are going to be the ones who are in charge of Earth, essentially. And it starts off with, Kit sat there and came to terms with what it felt like when all the blood drained from your face. It was a feeling he really didn't like. You're kidding, right? He said after a moment. Tom shook his head. I know this is a terrible thing to dump on you, he said. But in a very short time, certainly within a couple weeks, possibly within days, we adult wizards are not going to be able to do our jobs anymore. We hoped we could head it off, Carl said. But even a mass intervention involving more than 2,000 seniors. Guys, I just want you to stop and hear that. 2,000 senior wizards from this part of the galaxy couldn't stop what was happening in our neighborhood or deal with the cause. So the main thing here is that the dark matter That's the actual physical problem. However, they do not understand why it's behaving the way that it is. And Nita thinks a little bit later about how eager both Tom and Carl are to not lay the blame for this solely at the feet of the lone power, which is sort of interesting because that makes me feel like they know something about, maybe not necessarily who could be doing this, but that makes me feel like they really don't believe it's simply the lone power. And I would like to know why they feel confident that's the case. And yeah, this whole, guys, this is just, the stakes in these stories are always very high. This isn't going to be the first or last time that the fate of the universe feels like it lies in our heroes' hands, That said, we have had other much smaller scale stories. Everything with Nita's mother passing away, for example, that is only about Nita's life. That is only about her personal battle and somebody who is important to her and how she learns to cope with that because she has to grow up and realize that magic isn't going to solve everything and that death can't be avoided perpetually. So even when it has been it could potentially be the end of the world, it has still always felt like, yeah, it could be. And it's up to Nita and Kit to get this figured out. Here, everybody is getting on board. And this is something that the seniors have already tried to deal with. And that gives it all a very different flavor. And it makes the scale of it all feel much greater, even though the actual potential consequences, I think that in the past, it's usually been accepted that it would be a consequence to Earth, but not necessarily a consequence to the rest of the galaxy universe. And that's my theory here, actually. I'm saying this all without stopping to actually itemize the threats that we've been up against before. I guess with Dareen, it's a slightly different scenario because she created a new world. But you guys know what I mean. This just has an energy to it that feels bigger and badder. So, I'm sorry guys, Patricia just showed up in the chat. First word, hiring. Second word, ho. Third word, never mind. Oh, I'm sorry. It's typos. I know. I've been there, but that is very funny. But welcome. I'm glad that you were able to make it. So like I said, the dark matter, they know that's what the thing is, but they don't know why it's behaving the way it is. Tom says the early indications are that something different from the Lone One's usual pattern of attack is going on. We're continuing to investigate, and Carl says not with a lot of success. And Kit can sense the difference in the way they are behaving. I am, oh my God, Patricia says, hello, and then in all caps, that one was me typing help. I'm sorry, Patricia. Maybe you want to do speech to text? Maybe it's the typing that you want to avoid? Anyway, so this comes up more than once. The fact that Kit and Nita, they have gotten used to Tom and Carl's energy with each other. And both of them are acting different. There's usually a sort of good-natured, a ribbing quality to their chats and a joking around. And the two of them are just not in that place at all right now. And I think that's always the part when you are not sure how to feel about something, really, is seeing that people who you have come to rely on as authority figures genuinely don't know what to do. That's the part that makes it all feel very real. And you start to be like, oh God, this is actually more than anyone was prepared to handle. So they decide to show them exactly what's happening. And I'm going to read the description of how this works. He pulls out his manual and it opens automatically to where he wants it to be. And then he says, here we go. He began to speak quietly and conversationally in the speech. As Kit watched, the manual and its pages seemed to spread out more and more widely across the table. Or maybe it was the table underneath it shrinking. But no, that couldn't be true. Kit was leaning with his forearms on the table and it wasn't moving, and neither was he. Nonetheless, the room darkened, the yellow-flowered wallpaper fading down and out as if someone had turned off the day. The pages of the book darkened, the table darkened too, and kept on spreading out into the darkness, somehow seeming to avoid everyone who was sitting around it. Farther and farther that flat darkness spread, though Kit and Nita and Doreen and Rashawn and Phyllis and Scarrett were all still illuminated, as if by an overhead light that nobody could see. So, basically, they wind up like all at once. It's almost like they're in a planetarium suddenly, and they're watching a sort of model of a couple of galaxies. Let's see. Without warning, the globe expanded outward in all directions as if heading for infinity. Where it passed, first stars flared into being and then galaxies. Within a few breaths' time, the kitchen table was at the heart of a viewpoint on the local group, the 30-odd galaxies closest to the Earth's Milky Way spiral, which Tom had placed at the center of the view for reference purposes. Close by hovered the ragged, irregular patches of starfire that were the greater and lesser Magellanic? It's after Magellan, but I don't know how you, I think it's Magellanic. Lesser Magellanic clouds. A little farther off, the great golden-tinged spiral of the Andromeda Galaxy hung in its majesty, with the other associated galaxies scattered in various directions around it and the Milky Way. So here's the neighborhood, Tom said. As he spoke, the utter blackness between the galaxies paled to a sky blue, and the light of the stars paled as well. I'm lightening up this black of space a little so you can see where our part of the trouble first started. He pointed off to one side. Faintly, in the depths of space between the Andromeda Galaxy and its neighbor, the smaller, loosely coiled spiral in Triangulum, a dim patch of darkness, started to grow in the blue. At first, Kit wasn't sure what he was seeing, but it became more and more distinct. So Tom tells them, this one we spotted like a few years ago, 3 years. And this happens sometimes. We get anomalies like this. Space can act weird. Dark matter can act weird. And so we just thought that it was something that we could keep an eye on, but not necessarily want to interfere with. And Kit compares it when he's like, sometimes if you mess with things too much, you can actually make it worse. And Kit compares it to sort of like having a scab or something that you pick at. And it's actually, making healing more difficult. So it grew, but not much and not quickly. There came a point where it seemed to have stopped. But then another one appeared. They saw it fade in very gradually on the opposite side of the local group, over by the small irregular galaxy known on Earth as GR8. And after that, the dark matter aggregates started appearing more quickly, in rapid succession over the past couple of years. Concentrations of dark matter appeared near 30 Doradus and M32. The dark splotches were spreading fast, popping up seemingly randomly in every direction. It's getting closer, Nita said. There's one right by the Lesser Magellanic Cloud that's really close, just next door almost. And then Kit's like, hey, did you speed the simulation up? And Tom's like, no, we did not. That's what we mean. Before, It was slow growth. It was something manageable that did not alarm us, that seemed like it was kind of normal. And as you can see, it doesn't have that quality anymore. So that was when the powers that be first asked wizards to start doing local interventions. The early wizardries, which were large group workings like the one we just came back from, seemed at first to work. The aggregates of dark matter froze, even began to retreat in a few cases, as you see here. That's how the situation stood until a few days ago. That spot over there, he pointed at one end of the simulation, and the view of that area leapt closer. That's where Carl and I were last week. 2,000 seniors and planetary supervisor wizards from all over our galaxy. And the intervention did not work, Rashawn said softly. No, Tom said. Instead, this happened. The darkness began to spread again, and this time much faster. It was as if someone was waiting to see whether we'd be able to pull it off, Carl said. When it was plain that we couldn't, the expansion took off again at twice the speed. And this is what the projected result looks like. Kit looked up into what was left of the blue of intergalactic space as the simulation ran. In a frighteningly short time, the blue was all gone. Then the blackness began to intrude among the stars of the galaxies themselves. The stars pushed apart. The galaxies started to lose shape. And Kit says matter can't move that fast in space. And Nita's like, yeah, this isn't matter. Like, not really. It's called dark matter, but it's space itself. If something's stretching space out of its usual shape, then everything inside space gets distorted. And Carl says, physical law is fairly robust, but wizardry is more delicate and subtle. The way this expansion undermines what we do is very simple, very nasty. So what it comes down to is reminder that the way that wizardry works in this universe, it's all very mathematical. You have to account for everything. You have to account for the name of a thing. You have to account for the function of it, the desire of it, and you have to account for its position, the position you want it to be. Like, all of the things that you're doing depend on certain factors that you have to know, absolutely. And if you have to use something's position in space in your spell, and its position in space is becoming more random, unreliable, and arbitrary, that will make the spell just not work, because what you're trying to target isn't where you said it would be. And that is super simple. And it sucks that the magic works that way and can be undermined that easily. You know, it's that sucks. That would be bad enough, Tom said, but matters get even worse. The changes in the structure of space then start affecting the thought processes and reactions of all living beings in the area. Their behavior will start to become less and less rational, less committed to life. This is the point where a wizard whose power levels are below a certain level starts losing the ability to speak or understand the speech because you stop believing that you can. Soon, you stop believing in the speech. Non-wizards suffer too. Matters of the heart and spirit will be valued less and less. Shortly, only physical things will seem real to people, and when that happens, because most humans will still remember that once the heart and spirit did matter, they'll get scared and angry. Eventually, anger and violence will be the only things that seem to work the way they used to. And the only things left that make people feel alive. So, and Nita's assertion is like, well, if that happens, we don't even have to wait for the dark matter to reach us to destroy the planet. We'll probably do it ourselves. You know, we've got all kinds of weapons. Mushroom clouds all over the planet, done. And I love that at the end of this, they're sitting there contemplating, and Philip is the one who's like, hey, if we're done here, can you bring the daylight back, please? Because Philip, like, he's a tree. He feeds on the sun. And I could see why for him, it would be more acute, the darkness and the feeling of being afraid because of the darkness than it might be otherwise. And this is just really like I said, the scale of it is completely different than what we've seen before. And the assertion in the last section where Kit's like, if you're going to lose your wizardry for a while. And I had sort of assumed that was going to be much more of like, that was a hypothetical, not something that was guaranteed to happen. Here, it's treated very much as a like guarantee, and it will be shortly. Like the way that the expansion has happened, it doesn't seem like they believe that they even have more than a couple of days necessarily before they begin to lose that. And I am just going to I'm drawing a line in the sand. I do not want to be here to see Tom and Carl stop believing in the speech. Okay? I'm just saying there are certain things that are too upsetting. And losing their wizardry is bad enough. But if we get to a point where they just like aren't believing in it anymore, I hate it. I really do. And I'm saying this knowing that there is potential for that to be reversible. Even so, it's too upsetting. I don't want to see it, even if it is reversible, It's just, I don't want to go through it. I hate it. Ugh. I just didn't like losing your wizardry, but knowing that wizardry exists, that still makes you feel like you've got some control over the situation. You may not be able to do things, but you can talk to Kit and Nita and you can be like, here's my suggestion. If I was able to, this is what I would do. These are things that we have tried in the past. All kinds of things can still be done. You can assist. If you don't even know that you're a wizard, if you don't believe in the speech, it's like somebody getting Alzheimer's. They're not going to understand their connection to you. They're not going to believe the things that you're doing or that you try to tell them. They're going to seem like a different person. That's like, that's what these two guys do. They're seniors. I can't imagine how much of their identity changes if that gets taken away from them. I hate it. Just, ugh. So why is all of this happening now? Rashawn's asking this. Surely, if this is so simple a strategy, the isolate power should have enacted it and made an end of us all ages ago. We don't know why, Tom said. There's always the possibility that the Lone One might not have known how to do this before. Though they're immortal, the powers that be aren't omniscient. They learn through the exact shape of their learning curve is never likely to be clear to us because of the way they exist outside of time, dipping in and out as it suits them. Or the lone power could have known for eons how to produce this result, but for some reason was waiting for the best moment to spring it on an unsuspecting universe. Then perhaps, Philip said, something has happened to embolden or frighten it. And Carl's like, or something's going on in our universe that the Lone One doesn't want us interfering with, and this is just like a distraction, a decoy, essentially. And Scret's like, okay, so you guys, like, we have all kinds of theories, but you have no idea which of these theories is more likely. And both Tom and Carl are like, correct. No, we do not. So the powers that be are waiting for the experts in this universe to give them some more data. Us. While they live here too, they do it on a different level. We're a lot more expert in the business of actually dealing with physicality day to day than they are. It's like the difference between manufacturing something, say a dishwasher, and using it every day. You could say the powers know what the universe acted like when it left the factory, but we're the ones who know the little noises it makes every day when it's running and where to kick it to make them stop. What a wild concept. this is something that I haven't spent too much time thinking about with this series because I felt like there was some danger in overthinking it. I didn't want things to begin to fall apart story-wise, and sometimes if I get too fixated on a detail or a hypothetical within a story, that can happen. But the powers that be have felt like so removed from everything, and it was really difficult for me to understand their role. It's still it's still difficult, but I feel like this gives you a better idea. The fact that they have to turn to human beings to gather data. They're wizards, sure, but they're still human beings. It is simultaneously really like upsetting that they are so powerful, but they can't figure this out themselves. And also kind of comforting that they are not completely omniscient. I've always found the concept of an omniscient God to be a little too easy. I felt like it's difficult to put into words, but it felt, especially when you if you're going with the sort of Christian God, where that God is meant to be somebody who has opinions on things, who is, passes judgment and maybe interferes, maybe doesn't. But there's a sort of consciousness and humanity in a way to that God. Combined with omniscience, I just couldn't reconcile what garbage shape the entire world is with that kind of God. And I know that's the overall question always, right? Is like, why does God let bad things happen? And it's like, well, because God gave us free will, and God isn't about to just interfere with free will willy-nilly, pun intended. It's meant to be our thing that we handle. And if God wanted to constantly interfere, he would come down and play checkers with us like pawns, and it wouldn't be anything that we even had a say in. But that's not how it's meant to work. We have to choose to be good and better and improve things ourselves. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything. And to a point, I really like that idea and I understand it. But there is something about that still feels like God doesn't really get it. Like, the free will thing, to a point. People are out in the world suffering horrifically over things that aren't due to their free will. They aren't choosing a lot of the situations that they wind up in. And so the free will thing feels rather hollow in a lot of situations. There are plenty of things that I'm in a bad place because I made bad choices, and that can be true. But a lot of our lives is much more up to chance than we want to think it is. And so the whole free will thing has always felt to me like it rests on everything that happens to you is something you somehow chose. And I never really bought into that concept of how it works. So God felt like kind of a dick to me in that respect. It was just like, so you're just going to sort of sit there and be like, well, this is all on you. It's your fault. So, and that's not actually true. This, with the powers that be, sending things out as if from, a factory, and just hoping they run the way that they were built to run, but not really having day-to-day contact with it, or perhaps not necessarily understanding because they aren't in it. And the fact that they acknowledge that they don't understand it because they're not in it, I deeply appreciate. For me, there's something about the powers being willing to acknowledge it that is key. That for me just makes all the difference in the world. And they're going to experts to be like, hey, tell us how this works. This is like the idea of, and I'm sure that you guys have been in this situation, especially if you work like retail or if you worked in food service, especially chain food service. There are hierarchies where management will have not worked on the floor for like a decade and they're in charge, but they have no idea anymore how this shit actually works. So they come to you with all of these improvements that they think are going to be very simple to implement. Meanwhile, you're looking over what they're suggesting, and none of this actually has anything to do with the real problems that you face with this job day to day. So all of the, like, their concerns feel totally out of touch to you because this isn't the shit you're worried about. This isn't the shit your workers are complaining about or the customers care about. And so you're just like, where did you even get this shit? And it turns out they don't remember what it was like to do this job, to really do it. They are too far removed at this point to understand anymore. And they have like a vague memory that has been distorted over time. That just happens. And I think that's like really a major problem with management. I feel like any job that has this kind of setup would benefit from management having to work on the floor for like at least a week every month and a half so that they truly get brought back down to earth in a real way. Because management will jump in during rush for a couple hours and they'll think that really like says something. Oh, I get it. I was there for that really busy day. No, you don't. You don't get it. You don't get it until it's day-to-day garbage. You just don't. And so the powers are like, they get that and they're trying to bring people who know. They're trying to go to their actual like team members on the floor and be like, so tell me what the fuck's going on. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not going to give you instructions because frankly, I don't think I know. So I'm going to let you feed me what your perception is of how this is going down, and then we'll deal with it. I'll tell you what, kids, this is like literally all I ask. Truly. If this is how the powers that be are in this universe, this is like the one that I hope is right. You know, there's all kinds of assertions about how this shit works. And if the powers, if like the idea of wizards being sort of their boots on the ground, what would that be? Let's say in our universe, we're trying to apply a similar principle, but wizards aren't real in our universe. And I'm saying that knowing I may be wrong. Who would that be then? Who reports to the powers and tells them, hey, so here's the thing. I feel like certain religions would want to say like they're priests or reverends or whatever, but that doesn't feel right to me. I would love to know how this would go. Anyway, I just wanted to talk about this because it just threw a lot of light on this topic with the powers that has been around in all these books, but I never really felt connected to. So, Tom says, right now we need to stop the dark matter from tearing the universe apart, or at least slow down its growth and buy ourselves some time to solve the problem. Or rather, buy you the time to solve it, Carl said. Wizards near latency age, near their peak power levels, are the only ones who'll keep their powers long enough to make a difference now. And Nita is looking at them, and there's a moment later where he's like, all right, well, first thing, we essentially are completely, like, off the leash. This is the good news. Any wizardry you can build to fight what's happening, any wizardry you can figure out how to fuel, is fair game. Normally, we all limit our workings carefully to keep them from damaging the universe or the beings who share it with us, but now the system itself is on the chopping block along with everything else. If we don't save that, then it's not just wizardry, but the life we've sworn to protect that's at an end. So, essentially, it's all subsidized now. Which, I feel like that is something that, just for Diane Duane, must have been really fun. Because, you know, everything takes a certain amount of energy. It's been repeated over and over again. Even at the very beginning of this, we have Nita just boiling a pot of water and feeling like she ran up the stairs. It's constantly restated. It's not free. It's not effortless. So I think for Diane Duane, it must be pretty fun to be like, but what if it was, though? What if it was that simple? And I just let them do whatever. They could do some wild shit. And I can't wait to see what that looks like. Granted, because boiling a pot of water for tea doesn't directly relate to saving the universe, I'm going to guess a spell like that will still cost energy. I have to think that there's like a restriction on that. But because that's what he says, any wizardry you can build to fight what's happening. That's the way he says it. So I don't think it's all wizardry. But if it were, I wouldn't be mad. When you said we were going to be running things, you didn't mean just us, did you? No, we didn't. Forgive us for making absolutely sure we had your attention when we started. And I was like, you fucker. I love that. And he's just like, oh, we wanted to fucking get you, like, to look at us and hear us. There are a lot of other wizards on the planet who'll be of use in this crisis, not to mention a whole lot of wizards elsewhere in our galaxy. And basically, all other seniors have been set on a mission to find promising younger wizards who have had good results in the past and put them on duty for this. And this is when he looks at Doreen and is like, so, remember how you got grounded because you submitted Nita and like your family for this cross-cultural trip thing that nobody had agreed to or consented to? We are going to remove that grounding now. But don't you assume that this automatically means you're going to be sent off planet. The team assignments haven't been thrashed out and you may be of more use here. And I love this. Kit's watching Nita's reaction and sees that she's like really making an effort to be like, I am very serious. I am listening. I am serious. I am a good girl who listens. And Kit is like, oh boy, I don't really buy this one, girl. Anyway, Tom said, whichever way your team assignments go, you're all either going to have to be on call at a moment's notice to deal with things, or you're going to have to be away for some time. Normally, we'd help you deal with your absence from school in real life. But this situation's not normal. Local implementation may suffer early on. And you're going to have to find other ways to handle your absence. Any way that we can help, let us know as soon as you have a plan. And this is what Nita winds up dealing with later in calling her counselor. So we'll get there, but Tom first talks to Scarrett, Philip, and Rashawn. Now, he tells Philip, you have such a high latency age that nearly all the wizards on the planet are still of an age range to be immune to what's going to happen. Officially, you're still both enjoying excursus. The emergency naturally supersedes the holiday. If you feel uncomfortable staying here, you can go home to your people at any time, but there's no need to rush home unless you feel you must. I am free to come and go as I please, Philip said, and have no binding ties to draw me immediately back. I am, after all, just one tree in a forest, and I think I might be of more use here. And then Scarrett says, I'm in no hurry either. I don't feel like that's exactly the same vibe, though, Scarrett. Like, I'm in no hurry. There's a tone to that sentence. When you say I'm in no hurry, what that means is, I'm going to put this off for as long as I fucking can. Whereas when Philip says, I am not in a rush to get back, it sounds genuinely like, I mean, I'll go back if I have to, but there's nothing in particular that's making me feel urgency to do that. It's just immediately apparent to everyone, like, something's going on with Scarrett. People of my species are legally independent a long time before we're finished being latent. My esteemed ancestor won't mind if I stay. And later on, like, I think that they're going to have have a conversation with him about this, but I feel so bad because I really like Scarrett, and obviously there's like a bad home life thing happening here. So, Tom says, let's see. Oh, he's talking to Philip. Your situation's complicated by your family's unique relationship with your planet and the way wizardry's practiced there. Sorry, not Philip. He's talking to Rashawn. Since your father, the Sun Lord that was, is your advisor, you're going to have to go home and sort out your intentions with him. And Rashawn just says it should not take long. And that's all he says. And now you're all up to date. Just make sure you understand one thing. You're not going to be immune from the loss of wizardry effect forever. For a while, it'll even seem to be going the other way, because as we lose our power, the powers that be are going to make sure it's not wasted by having it pass to you. But unless you work very fast to find out exactly what it is you need to do with it, then all that extra power isn't going to help you for long. You'll lose it as we'll lose it. You'll lose the speech and wizardry and even the belief that there ever was any such thing. And then the darkness will fall. So, yeah, that sucks. I hate it. I mean, it's cool. Get powered up a little extra. Off the leash as far as, like, the power supply. But fucking yikes. So at this point, here comes Spot. It's funny because it seems very obvious to me what's going on, but I guess this is the sort of thing that happens when you're a little too close to something. Spot comes out and says some portentous shit. And Doreen's first response is like, he's totally malfunctioning. What is this? Do I have to clear your RAM out? What's going on? She does not take any of it seriously. And I was like, girl, obviously this is important. Why are you and thankfully Carl and Tom immediately are like, that sounded like something we should listen to. And he's apparently Spot's been hiding under the bed this whole time, and Doreen's been trying to get him out. And this is the first time he's come out, and she's glad, but still rather concerned about him. 3 true things await discovery, Spot said. Oh, excuse me. Darkness overspreading, a cormorant underground, and the moon is no dream. He sat there for a moment more, silent, and then got up on all his little legs again and spidered off into the kitchen. So let's look up cormorancy. Wikipedia. No Wikipedia results were found for your selection. Dictionary, no definition found. So maybe this is something that's unique to this universe. Darkness overspreading. I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory, but I could be wrong, and it might just mean something a little bit more particular. And the moon is no dream. That makes it sound like, I know you think the moon's fake, but it's real. But that can't be what it means, because nobody thinks the moon is fake. I'm wondering if they, because the moon is essentially like a satellite to our planet, right? And it formed when Earth was still pretty liquid. I feel like I learned that from this series because I thought it was broken off. But I feel like I remember it being our Earth hadn't cooled enough yet to be solid. And so there was a big glob that floats off and becomes the moon. Is something that they're supposed to do about making a sort of a satellite or something that reflects power? Or I don't know. All of this is one of those things where, is it helpful for him to say this? This is my problem. Anytime there's something with portents or future talk, somebody making predictions, it doesn't ever really seem to matter that they came in the room and said a thing. You know, occasionally it might be like, oh, I get it. I'm supposed to do X, Y, Z sometimes. But a lot of the time it feels like, so things just like happened the way they were going to happen. And you were here to like, let us know I know some shit. I'm here to be mysterious. But you didn't help us with any of it. And I'm curious to find out whether Spot's going to fall into the former or latter category. So yeah, this is when, let's see, I'm trying to find the spot where one of them calls it Oraclean or oracular. Tom looked over at Carl. That certainly sounded oracular to me. I have never heard that word, but I really like it, and I'm going to try and remember it. Oracular. So Carl is like, yeah, we may want to write this stuff down because it might turn out to be useful at some point. And I'm like, I hope you're right. I hope it does turn out to be useful because otherwise I'm just going to be like, Spot, what's your point? And Spot, for his part, does not remember saying this. Doreen calls him back into the room and is like, what the fuck was that? And Spot's like, the fuck was what? I'm just here to get a coffee. What's your problem? And she's like, you said something weird. And he's like, no, I didn't. And that's like it. She repeats it back to him and he just says, did I say that? Oh, that's weird. And that's all there is to it. So clearly something was speaking through him. So this is when they talk about commorancy and they realize that they've never heard the word before. And why didn't you tell us about this before? Kit asked. Tom and Carl each let out a long breath. Because there might not have been any need for you to worry about it if we solved it, because you had enough to deal with in your own lives, because we were fairly sure we could handle the problem, and so were the powers that be. And then things didn't turn out the way any of us thought they would, so it became time to start worrying you. Believe me, we wish we didn't have to. So, at this point, they get up and leave. They're like, definitely keep us in the loop. Let us know what's going on. And they mention that they're going to have to go and touch base with a lot of other people. And Nita asks why they don't just world gate. And he says, we're saving our strength. Which, that really, sucks. Because it's not even like they're at a point where they're beginning to lose their wizardry quite yet. But they know it's coming, so they already have to be sort of guarded about their power usage, which feels really rude. Let's see. Patricia says, the Oracle of Macintosh. This is what happens when you don't have any fish. Wait, what? Oh, because theirs is the koi? Is that what you mean? No pets, and the Oracle has to come via the next semi-sentient being in the house. Why can't it just be like Nita? Just, she's having these weird dreams. Have her be the Oracle. But it's fine. I'm not mad at it. It's just weird. So let's see. They are both completely freaked, Nita said. I've never seen them like that before. They're freaked? What about us? Yeah, I know. Behind them, the screen door banged. They both turned to look. The screen door banged, guys. Doreen came out. And then she gets followed by everybody. And Doreen is in the midst of talking to Rashawn. You're going to love them. They're unbelievably terrific. And she doesn't tell them what it is. Let's see. Something tells me you're thinking about doing some traveling. Doreen looked over her shoulder back up the driveway. 20 feet or so behind her, Spot was sitting in the middle of the driveway, staring with all his eyes at the sky. They all looked upward to see what he was staring at, but nothing was immediately obvious. It's not somewhere I've been for a while, except virtually. Not enough energy available for the transit, but now it's a whole new ball game. And is she talking about her alien computer species that she made? I don't know what it is she's referring to. It feels like that's what she's saying, but... And let's see. Rashawn says that the world gate, because his, by the way, like got destroyed, or his like subsidized little portal, but they got him a new one. Kit took Nita by the elbow and steered her casually away. And he is saying to her, the two of them are at it again. And evidently, this is something that just keeps happening. Rashawn and Doreen clearly seem to have a crush on one another. But they're always sniping at each other, too. And Nita sort of wonders if it's that Doreen likes the challenge. And speaking for myself, that's always been a thing for me. If you are a fairly intelligent person, it depending on the kind of empathy that you have. For me, for example, I discovered fairly early on in my life that it is very easy to manipulate people if you want to be the kind of person that manipulates people. And if you are somebody who can read people fairly well, you know exactly like how to play them specifically versus someone else. And I saw that in myself early on enough and had been doing it unconsciously, and then sort of stepped back and really looked at myself and realized what I had been doing for years, which was sort of like playing with people. And I was like, oh, that's not great. I don't like that about myself. And the problem was that as I was dating, a lot of dudes, it was like kind of easy to fall into starting to do that because they didn't seem to like realize what was going on. They didn't suspect it. And sometimes it was because they trusted me, which makes me real shitty, like extra shitty. And I remember when I was first talking to Owen, and again, I will slip into doing this unconsciously. I don't like it and I try not to. And every now and then when I'm feeling really bitchy or resentful, that nasty part of my personality will come out and I'll start to like sort of play on a certain part of a person, knowing the kind of reaction I'm likely to get. And it's not nice or good. And I started doing that with Owen. And it was like a particular thing. It wasn't high stakes, but it was just a thing. And I was being a little pushy with it. And he stopped and looked at me and said, I feel like you're behaving like XYZ in order to force me into feeling X and to do Y. And I don't like it. And he just completely called me out on what the fuck I was doing. Like, just saw right through it and said so. That was the thing. And it was a moment for me of just being like, oh shit. I appreciated being challenged. I felt like I want to be better. And in order to stay on that track, you need to surround yourself with people who are willing to tell you the truth about yourself. And that isn't something we all like. Some people are not ready for that kind of thing yet. But it's something that forces you to do and be better or think differently about things. And that was honestly like a major moment for me in our relationship of me realizing that like I had picked the right person. And I feel like that's sort of how Nita, Doreen operates. She is really smart. And she's the kind of smart where, like, sometimes she misjudges because her family knows her better than she thinks they do. So she thinks she can pull one over on them more than she's actually able. But I think Doreen, released into the wild of the world, would actually be able to play a lot of people really well. And having somebody like Rashawn in her life who, like, fucking knows what she's doing is good for her. And I could see why the challenge, wizardry-wise as well, would be really welcome, you know? And just overall, it's interesting that she attracted somebody who is so similar to her. But regardless, I understand the wanting a challenge thing. Some people have grown up with a challenge their whole lives, and so they look for someone who feels really safe, and they don't want a challenge because it doesn't feel like it's going to foster growth and stability for them. And that I completely understand as well. That's just not my experience personally. I grew up without a lot of direct sort of, what's the word I want? Obstacle to my personality. My parents didn't know that was what I was doing. They never called me out on anything like that. And being an only child, it also sort of changes the way you interact with people. So for me, it feels new still to have somebody in my life who's like, yeah, you're full of shit. I know you're full of shit. You know you're full of shit, more importantly. Like, what are you doing? So at this point, let's see, Kit says, if our parents don't completely get what's happening, it's not like they can stop us. I know, Nita said, but I'm so used to them coping now. I'm getting spoiled for being open about it. It saves so much time. And it's sort of a weird thing. This is like the beginnings of them wondering, what are they supposed to say? How much can they tell? And Nita says that she's worried she may just start to completely panic and freak out once it starts to sink in because she's still in shock. So Kit glances down the street and he's like, you know what? He sees Carmela coming and she's like, you done with your big meeting? And they're like, ugh, yeah. Paunch shows up and says, your pop forgot you fed me, so I got another dinner. I wouldn't have to do this if you guys would just feed me as much as I need. And I was like, oh, Paunch, never change, please. I'm going to go home and give my mom and pop the news. The sooner they find out, the sooner they'll get over it, I hope. And Nita says there should be a stripped down version of the story in the manuals, and she reaches in for her manual and pulls it out with this look on her face. And Kit's like, what's the matter? And then he sees it and he's like, oh, shit. Because her manual is the size of Tom's manual now. It's giant, like a phone book, which really gets it across. She's in a senior position now. And later on, Scarrett addresses her as senior. And she's just like, no, please don't. This is just too weird. I don't like it. It's one thing to get a promotion because you're like considered excellent. It's another thing to get a promotion because everybody above you has been rendered impotent. No thanks. So that ends chapter 2. And when we start 3, we have Nita, and she is heading inside. Let's see. She has a moment with, Rashawn. And Doreen is saying to him, he's never done this before. How am I supposed to depend on Spot if he can't even remember things from one moment to the next? He's my version of the manual. What if this memory loss thing starts extending to his reference functions? And I just really think she's worrying about nothing. I don't think that this is indicative of Spot's functionality. I think that he got taken over for a moment and that's over. And she doesn't have anything to worry about. But I can understand how, with him being so integral to her magic, it would be unnerving that is possible to happen. However, think about the way that like Nita's book works, and she can get messages like sent in the book. So it's really very similar. It's just, I don't know. Doreen seemed to be upset over something that I didn't think was actually a big deal. So Nita goes upstairs and let's see. I think this is when she first makes her call. From behind her came a faint clattering noise. This is right. This is Scarrett coming downstairs. And there's a bit of a thing here. So let's see. I meant to ask you earlier, if you don't want to go back to your own people for some reason, no matter what happens in the next few weeks, stay with us. We're glad to have you here. Thank you, Scarrett said seriously. I thank you. I'll be back in a while. And he leaves, and she's sort of worried that she offended him. I really wanted her to straight up ask him what's going on. Because she says to herself, maybe it's nosy. No, we have to start keeping an eye on each other. We might be doing dangerous shit. And I thought that meant I should know what's going on with him. But she doesn't actually ask that. And I am apparently more nosy than her because I want to fucking know. So then we have the phone call. And she decides to go through Mr. Millman. And this is a really smart idea. He isn't a wizard, but he knows about it. And essentially, what it is she can give him enough information that he understands how absolutely crucial it is that she, Doreen, and Kit not be in school, while not telling him too much about what's going on. And thus, he will be able to create a convincing story as to why they are not in school. And he will understand the stakes, theoretically, and what they are up against so that he really truly gets how much effort he should be putting into making sure the story is believable. Because if he thinks that they're just, taking some days off to do some weird magic experiments, he's not going to try that hard. But if he knows that the fucking universe is at stake, it's going to be different. And he sort of pushes her a little bit on it. From the sound of what you're not saying, I gather you're still processing the results. What's going on that makes you need this extra time off? And she says something about the other wizards, and I wish I could tell you more, but they don't understand it completely yet either, and we don't really know what we're going to do about it. And he says, I haven't been seeing Kit professionally, so I'm not really sure how I'm going to handle what's going on with him. And he says that he's reluctant to lie because it undermines his relationship and contract with the school. This kind of lost school time is not good, especially with your aptitude tests coming up. If we don't do something pretty drastic right away, Nita said, there may not be a planet to have aptitude tests on for very long. Or there might be a planet, but no one left on it. She could just hear him thinking. You need to understand, he said, that just because we share the same privileged information about your special talents, I'm not to be routinely considered as a get-out-of-jail card. This gambit isn't going to work more than once, just so you know. Nita rolled her eyes. Being in this situation again is the very, very last thing on my mind. Good. How long do you think you'll need? I have absolutely no idea. And eventually, he's like, look, I'm going to do the best I can. Probably I can buy you 10 days. But after that, they are going to come knocking at your door. And they're going to want to know where you are. And there might be cops involved because it will be seen as neglect. So just keep it in mind, you may have something that seems much more important than all of that going on with you, but that doesn't mean the consequences on planet Earth don't continue to happen. And I was just like, oh, that's true. And that's so annoying. I appreciated that reminder because it is easy for me to just be like, oh, who cares? But if they succeed, they're going to have to continue their lives as they were. And that could be a fucking problem to try and return to life as normal, except dad's arrested for neglect. Yikes. And she gives him the bare bones. I haven't had a lot of time to go over the pre-mission presses, but people are going to start losing their sense of what's underneath reality. Only physical things are going to seem real after a while, and even those won't feel right for long. Finally, only violent emotions are going to feel good. And he says, do you know what you need to do to reverse this? And she says it's expanding too fast and we have to stop before it tears itself apart. Okay, I see why you might need a few extra days off for that. The complete dryness of his voice was bizarrely reassuring to Nita, so much so that she laughed out loud. And I really appreciated this. Just his whole energy here. He is very serious, and he's not a pushover. Her asking for extra time, he lays a very clear boundary and is like, I'm not going to just do this for you all the time. And I appreciate that being made clear, especially because that could be a very easy thing for the author to rely on as a get out of jail card for her stories so that they have all this free time. And I think it's smart for her to make it clear that's not going to be something that she keeps running to as a means of making things easier for them. So this section ends with him saying goodbye, and she's realizing, so we've got 2 weeks to save the world. Cool. Maybe this won't exactly be a piece of cake, but at least people are rooting for you when you start cutting it up because of the way that he's so confident in her. Nita picked up her manual, tucked it under her arm, and headed upstairs to her room. And that's the end of that section in Chapter 3. That was where I was told to stop by Jacob, so I did. All right, I am going to wrap up, but thank you again very much for listening. Thank you to Patricia for commissioning the episode. I appreciate you all, and I will see you soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.